Hi, if you're new here, welcome to my channel. My name's Lara, adoptee, wellbeing researcher, coach and psychotherapist. And in today's video, I want to talk to you all about emotional processing, what it is, why we need to do it, and 3 ways in which we avoid doing it. I've often been asked, what does it actually mean to process an emotion? Because we hear people saying all the time, have you processed that feeling? Have you processed that emotion? And often people don't really understand what that actually means. And the reason that people don't understand what that actually means is because they're not allowing themselves very often to do that, and so they're never getting to the point of benefiting from having processed the emotion. It's just not something they allow themselves to do. The reason they don't allow themselves to do it is because it feels uncomfortable, it feels unpleasant, and so instead of processing an emotion, which I shall come back to in a second, they find other ways to avoid the discomfort of the feeling or the emotion. But essentially, what processing an emotion actually means is to, first of all, sit with the feeling, sit with the emotion, in the understanding that it's temporary, that it will pass, primarily emotions and negative emotions, but positive too, but the more negative emotions are the ones that we feel very strongly in our bodies. In terms of fear or anxiety, they can make our throat feel constricted, our heart race faster, our chest can feel tight, our palms can feel sweaty. Other emotions can be felt in our belly and in our gut. And so very often emotions are felt through the body, and those physical sensations feel very uncomfortable. And what we try to do unconsciously is to make that stop. So then we turn to other ways, which I'll come on to in just a sec, of dealing with that discomfort. But processing that emotion means allowing for that to exist, for that physical sensation to exist, for us to sit within that, knowing that it will not last, that it is temporary, so that we can then move through that to a point of then working with the issue or coming to terms with the set of circumstances that have caused that feeling. And it's that is the processing part of dealing with feeling. And as an existential therapist, we always look to meaning in our lives, and so very often processing emotion means coming to terms with new meaning. It means creating new meaning. A very clear example of that would be there's somebody that we love very dearly and they die. We cannot bear the grief that their death has caused us, and so we maybe turn to other kind of activities to numb the pain, if you like, of that loss, and therefore we are not beginning the process of creating new meaning for ourselves. And what I mean by that is that we all tell ourselves a story. We all understand ourselves in a particular way. And the person that has passed away was part of that story. They were part of your story. And so when that person leaves and you have to then go about your life without that person, the process that's involved is creating a new meaning for yourself and a new way of understanding your life. That's what processing that emotion really is. And it's not always about loss. There are all sorts of triggers to bad feeling, but it's only when we actually allow the feeling to exist that we then can work with that, with the cause of that, by either triggering aspects or by creating new meaning for ourselves. The 3 really clear ways that many humans deal with uncomfortable feelings all fall under the umbrella of avoidance because it feels uncomfortable, and the brain will try and create other suggestions so that we can get out of that state as quickly as possible. But what the interesting part about that, and the irony about that, is that if we don't sit with the feeling, if we do avoid, suppress, turn our backs to, let's say, the bad feeling, that it will just stay like that for, in some cases, years and years. And I've seen people go on to be emotionally numb, to develop depression and other severe symptoms. Whereas when we sit in the feeling and allow the feeling and allow ourselves to really go to the root of what's causing that, the discomfort is maybe more intense, maybe more real, which is obviously the goal, but it's shorter term. And so it allows you to come out the other side with a new sense of meaning, a better understanding, and to go on to have a much more enjoyable life with better chance at living with well-being. And so in order to achieve that avoidance, the number one way in which people avoid discomfort is by self-medicating. Now, that's not just with drugs, prescription or non-prescription. It's with alcohol, it can be with food, it can be with shopping, it can be with sex. And addiction is a very real disease, but what we know is that whilst we're all susceptible to some sort of addiction, that when we create a behaviour which allows our brain to release dopamine, that takes us temporarily away from the pain, that in itself can become quite an addictive thing to do. And so what we're actually doing is avoiding the root of the pain, avoiding the cause, and avoiding sitting in the discomfort. Those are some really clear ways in which humans will deal with or avoid dealing with discomfort and pain, painful emotion. The problem with those behaviours is that very often they will cause quite severe secondary issues such as alcoholism, addiction, debt, and financial problems, and all sorts of other problems, because the one thing that we know about addiction is that it creates real divide in families, that will go to any length to cover it up, and that we will become very adept at lying and hiding. So now you've got another issue on top of the issue of the pain. And you can then get into a whole negative self-talk kind of process where you're heaping shame on yourself, you're dealing with yourself in quite a judgmental way. And so it's really unhelpful. Another clear way, number two, the second clear way in which people will avoid dealing with pain is by projecting it onto other people. So we know that that's what people do. And so very often we see people talk about others in negative ways. We hear people being very judgmental about other people and the choices that they make, the things that they do. And this is a way of projecting our pain onto others. And it's a very effective way, actually, of enabling us to avoid dealing with what's going on with ourselves. So projection onto others, and very often just gossiping and being negative about other people, talking a lot about other people, is very often a sign that we're not dealing with our own emotional stuff. And you know, it can be difficult. You know, sometimes that process involves calling ourselves out for things, and that's not something that many humans are ready and willing to do. So it becomes a projection onto others. The third and also very common way of avoiding difficulty and working through pain is by taking on the position of victim and of becoming helpless, becoming unable to transcend your own problems, feeling as though you shouldn't have to deal with a certain set of problems that have occurred in your life, that it's unfair, that it's unjust. And I think whilst it's very natural to have that thought process, very often as a human being, it's kind of unhelpful in the end. I always say to people, you know, allow yourself to lick your wounds, allow yourself to take a day of downtime to be kind to yourself and to feel a bit sorry for yourself if necessary, but don't overindulge that, because in the end it holds you back. And so in the same way that being the victim, and in the same way that speaking negatively about other people, and in the same way that self-medicating or doing all those other behaviours which avoid you dealing with the actual problem, none of those are really helpful long term. Okay, so then when you are allowing yourself to sit with the emotion, and there are certain ways that I advocate doing that, be that through a meditation, be that through just sitting mindfully and checking in with yourself, through a walk, through journaling. Allow the emotion to exist, and just remember that it is only temporary. It is not permanent. It will pass. And when the pain, the physical discomfort passes, what's left emotionally is the reality of a situation that's happening outside of you, to which you then need to adjust or deal with what's going on. And then you can move forward. You can move forward in a healthier way, in a better way, and achieve better levels of well-being. And as I say, being a human, that brings with it a degree of discomfort, a degree of pain, and a degree of sadness. And all of those things are a natural part of life. That's all completely normal. And we have this idea that we should be seeking to feel happy every day, that we should feel ecstatic all the time, that sadness is something to avoid. And yes, it's part of life. It's part of being a human. It's something that you have to deal with, something that we all have to deal with. But we can work with it in healthier ways. So if you are somebody who has been avoiding dealing with emotion, that you find that too challenging, you're very likely not very connected with the reasons for that. And you may acknowledge to somebody that you don't like being in your own head, or that you find silence challenging and you're creating a lot of distraction all around you so that you don't have to sit with the reality of the feeling. Don't be harsh on yourself. It's a very natural thing to want to avoid painful sensations, both in the body and painful thoughts in the mind. But once you get to the point of recognizing that that's what you're doing, that's the point at which you can now start to do something different. So don't judge yourself. Don't be harsh on yourself. Be compassionate towards yourself if you've been carrying out one of those three things. But it's never too late to change. So have a think about that. Sit with your feelings. Allow them to exist so that you can move through that and process the new meaning either in your life or how to tackle the set of circumstances that have given rise to that feeling. We get a bad rap all the time for saying, process your feelings. Have you processed your feelings? You need to sit with the feelings. And people say, why? Why do I have to? How does that help? And there you have the answer. So I hope that you have found that helpful. Thank you, as always, for watching, for taking the time to watch. And if you found that helpful, if you found that beneficial, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And I'll be back with more soon. Thank you.